Today, we are going to go over musical notation. So if you've ever played a musical instrument before, this is all going to be super old news for you. But if you're like me and you don't play an instrument, this may be some new information. So we're going to talk today about reading, writing, and listening to music. So we're going to start with the notes. Okay, we talked about the notes on the staff last class. Those are also known as a scale. When you go up and down the notes on the staff, that's called a scale. So that comes from a very old form of music where they use these sounds, and you may have heard it in this song.
So I just ordered these 4 pieces here, and it was supposed to cost me over $100, but it ended up costing me only $60.
Skip ad. All right. So you may have heard the song. We're not going to listen to it all, but go through the scale.
The very beginning, a very good place to start. When you read, you begin with A, B, C. When you sing, you begin with Do, Re, Mi. Do, Re, Mi. The first 3 notes just
So she's going up the scale.
Be. Do, Re, Mi. Do, Re, Mi. Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti. Oh, come. I'll make it easier. Listen. Do, a deer, a female deer. Re, a drop of golden sun. Mi, a name I call myself. Fa, long, long way to run. So, a needle pulling thread. La, a note to follow. So, tea, a drink with jam and bread. That will bring us back to dough. Oh, 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 dough. A deer, a female deer. Right, a drop of golden sun.
Okay, so she goes through those notes, starting at do and then going up to do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So again, that just goes through the scale. So those are just a kind of more common musical notation scale. And now we're going to watch this quick TED Talk. It's about 5 minutes. That explains musical notation.
When we watch a film or a play, we know that the actors probably learned their lines from a script, which essentially tells them what to say and when to say it. A piece of written music operates on exactly the same principle. In a very basic sense, it tells a performer what to play and when to play it. Aesthetically speaking, there's a world of difference between, say, Beethoven and Justin Bieber, but both artists have used the same building blocks to create their music, notes. And although the end result can sound quite complicated, the logic behind musical notes is actually pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at the foundational elements to music notation and how they interact to create a work of art. Music is written on 5 parallel lines that go across the page. These 5 lines are called a staff, and a staff operates on 2 axes, up and down and left to right. The up and down axis tells the performer the pitch of the note, or what note to play.
How high or how
and
low?
The left to right axis tells the performer the rhythm of the note, or when to play it.
Or how long?
Let's start with pitch. To help us out, we're going to use a piano, but this system works for pretty much any instrument you can think of. In the Western music tradition, pitches are named after the first 7 letters of the alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. After that, the cycle repeats itself: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. But how do these pitches get their names? Well, for example, if you played an F and then played another F higher or lower on the piano, you'd notice that they sound pretty similar compared to, say, a B. Going back to the staff, every line and every space between 2 lines represents a separate pitch. If we put a note on one of these lines or in one of these spaces, we're telling a performer to play that pitch. The higher up on the staff a note is placed, the higher the pitch. But there are obviously many, many more pitches than the 9 that these lines and spaces give us. A grand piano, for example, can play 88 separate notes. So how do we condense 88 notes onto a single staff? We use something called a clef. A clef is a weird-looking figure placed at the very beginning of a staff, and it acts like a reference point telling you that a particular line or space corresponds to a specific note on your instrument. If we want to play notes that aren't on the staff, we kind of cheat and draw extra little lines called ledger lines and place the notes on them. If we have to draw so many ledger lines that it gets confusing, then we need to change to a different clef. As for telling a performer when to play the notes, two main elements control this: the beat and the rhythm. The beat of a piece of music is, by itself, kind of boring. It sounds like this. Notice that it doesn't change, it just plods along quite happily. It can go slow, or fast, or whatever you like really. The point is that just like the second hand on a clock divides 1 minute into 60 seconds, with each second just as long as every other second, the beat divides a piece of music into little fragments of time that are all the same length. Beats. With a steady beat as a foundation, we can start adding rhythm to our pitches, and that's when music really starts to happen. This is a quarter note. It's the most basic unit of rhythm, and it's worth 1 beat. This is a half note, and it's worth 2 beats. This whole note here is worth 4 beats, and these little guys are eighth notes, worth half a beat each. Great, you say. What does that mean? You might have noticed that across the length of a staff, there are little lines dividing it into small sections. These are bar lines, and we refer to each section as a bar. At the beginning of a piece of music, just after the clef, is something called the time signature, which tells the performer how many beats are in each bar. This says there are 2 beats in each bar, this says there are 3, this one 4, and so on. The bottom number tells us what kind of note is to be used as the basic unit for the beat. 1 corresponds to a whole note, 2 to a half note, 4 to a quarter note, an eighth to an eighth note, and so on. So this time signature here tells us that there are 4 quarter notes in each bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But like I said before, if we just stick to the beat, it gets kind of boring. So we'll replace some quarter notes with different rhythms. Notice that even though the number of notes in each bar has changed, the total number of beats in each bar hasn't. So, what does our musical creation sound like? Sounds okay, but maybe a bit thin, right? Let's add another instrument with its own pitch and rhythm. Now it's sounding like music. Sure, it takes some practice to get used to reading it quickly and playing what we see on our instrument, but with a bit of time and patience, you could be the next Beethoven. Or Justin Bieber.
So hopefully you understand musical notation a little bit. We're going to practice it again with the rest of this PowerPoint. But so in that TED Talk and the notes that they played, it was mostly the treble clef, but then we also have the bass clef, the alto clef, and the tenor clef. The notes that we learned last class, the Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge and Face in the Space, those are notes on the treble clef. So we saw a bunch of quarter notes on the staff in that video. So we always start with the whole, and then we have half, quarter, eighth, and 16. So if you know on the way down, each one is just kind of one little variation off. So we start with an empty circle for the whole, and then half is an empty circle with a stick, and then the quarter is a filled in circle with a stick, and an eighth is a filled in circle with a stick and a flag, and then the 16th filled in circle, stick, 2 flags. So each one is just a slightly different variation on the previous. Then, so in 4/4 time, this whole note is always 4 counts, 4 beats. The half is going to be half of that, which is 2. The quarter is going to be 1. The eighth is half, and the 16th is a quarter. So I know you're like, why? And that's because the whole measure, that whole bar, is 4 beats in 4/4 time. So one whole note takes up that whole measure of 4 beats. So that means you would play that note for 4 beats of the music. So you would hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4. The half note, you would hold it for half of that time, which is 2 beats. 1, 2. Okay, so on and so forth. So each of these lines is worth 4 beats. Okay, so this whole note all by itself, 4 beats. 2 half notes, 4 beats. 4 quarter notes, 4 beats. So each of these, we're breaking it down like a Christmas tree. So the whole note can be broken down as equal to 2 half notes. Each half note can be broken down into quarter notes, so on and so forth. Okay? Then we also have the exact same notes for rest. So the only difference in notes and rest is that rest literally means you are not playing anything. You are resting. No sound is playing for that number of beats. So if you have a whole rest, a hole, like a hole in the ground, it sits underneath the bar line, doesn't go all the way down, just sits about halfway underneath, is 4 counts. The half rest sits on top of the bar line, 2 counts. The quarter rest is like a backwards looking squiggly E. Then we have the eighth, which is like a little flag, and 16th, which is a double flag. Those have the exact same counts as the notes for the measure. So we can break down those the exact same way we broke down the notes. Okay, the time signature. The most common time signature for almost every piece of music you hear now is 4/4. That means there are 4 beats in a measure with a quarter note. There are 4 quarter notes in the 4/beat measure, okay? So this is the standard time signature for most musical compositions, especially those coming out right now. The time signature specifies how many beats are in each measure and that those beats are quarter notes. If something has 2/4 time, like right here, that means it has 2 quarter notes per measure. Okay, so that means that entire measure is only 2 beats. If something has 6/4 time, it's where we get complicated, but it has 6 quarter notes per measure, that means that that measure is made up of 6 beats. Okay? So where is that time signature going to be found? It's always going to be right on the inside of the clef. So here we have a treble clef on the staff, and then right next to it we have that time signature 4/4. So again, that top number tells you how many beats per measure, and the bottom number tells you what kind of note is 1 beat. So if we're looking at this measure right here, we have our time signature, so we know we're in treble clef, or we have our clef, which is treble, so we know what notes we're using. We have our time signature, so we know we're in 4/4 time. There are 4 beats of quarter notes per measure. So how many quarter notes fit into this 4/4 measure? 4 of them. Okay, so one more thing. So notice how on these quarter notes the stick is going down. That doesn't matter. It makes no difference whether the stick goes up or down. On this one, the note is just higher up on the staff, so they made the stick go down. That doesn't change anything. How many half notes would fit into a 4/note measure, into a 4/4 measure? 2. And how many whole notes? Just 1. How many 16 notes fit into that? 16. Okay, so each of these would make a full measure of music. Okay, then we can do some tricky things with dotted notes. So anytime you see a note and then it has a little dot next to it, that means it is worth 1.5 of its value. So say we have a quarter note worth 1 beat. If we take that quarter note and we dot it, making it a dotted quarter note, it is now worth 1.5 beats. Okay, so if a quarter note is worth 1, then count the dotted note is worth 1.5. Okay, ooh. If a half note is worth 2, a dotted half note would be worth 3. Okay, so the 2 beats of the original note, and then the dot adds half. Half of 2 is 1, and then 2 plus 1 is 3, making that dotted half note worth 3 beats. If an eighth note is worth a half a count, got to get into fractions here. How much is a dotted eighth note worth? So how much is half of a half? A quarter. A quarter plus a half is 3/4. Okay, so think of these notes kind of as pieces of a pie. Now let's practice. There is a Kahoot coming. I think. As long as I can figure out how to share it. The Kahoot is coming.